About Jeff's coverage is he skipped that. I mean, he tried. He was looking for the tar balls, but he went to the people who were being impacted, like the pasture, and he went to the. Maybe you can talk about the guy who had the fishing industry guy, the guy who had the shop. I mean, he had like hard numbers about how his business had tanked just by perception alone. So I'd seen those pictures. I've seen Dirty Birds. It's horrible, but the people who were affected was more impressive.
Well, to Bob's point, these could be those staged areas, if you want to call them that, where people are allowed in to see what's happening. People I talked to included the guy who had the sports shop, where he was down $1 million over the first 2 quarters of the year in sales, because people weren't allowed to go out and lead sport fishing tours or go out there and just fish. So he's not selling any fishing equipment because people aren't out there buying hooks and lures and rods and anything that they might need. I mean, when I went down the coast, I saw all these crab traps just sitting dry on land where they usually would be out in the harbor, but people had just collected them and they were just sitting on the shore. The other guy I talked to was, he had a wholesale fishing company. It was Louisiana Seafood Exchange, and he was on track to have his best first 2 quarters of any year ever. And he was just cranking along, and he provides fish to restaurants all over the region. And he said, and then the oil spill hit. And the perception was that the fish wasn't safe to eat. And this is right off the bat. This is before the oil's like spread out over the surface a little bit. Just the well has exploded, people have died, and the oil started to spill into the Gulf, and suddenly everyone stepped in, and the perception has impacted his business in a huge way. He's resourceful enough, having been in business for a quarter century, to know that he can quickly go to a farm and have redfish, farmed fish, sent over to restaurants and source them from different areas. Go over to the Texas coast where the oil hasn't gotten and grab oysters from beds over there and just source this stuff. But the impact is really strong, and it's real for a number of people. So.
Well, that helps him. That doesn't help the fisherman.
Right, it doesn't help the fishermen. I mean, the fishermen, the only thing that was positive for them, except for the fact that fishing is their lifeblood, it's something they'd love to do, and would probably do it even if they weren't making as good a wage as they make usually, they signed on to help go clean the oil. And BP was paying them a great wage, and they could go do that. They were making the same money, just using their boats in a different way. But most of them, when they'd come back into shore, couldn't wait to get back out and fish. So it was a little anxiety producing, because they go out there, lay out boom or collect boom or just help out, and they still want to go fishing. It was tough to get anyone to talk on the record, only because BP was writing them checks. But there was sentiment, and there were people off the record who were displeased with the way stuff was transpiring.
If you're interested in sort of a little more raw look at the local fishing industry down there, Discovery Channel has Deadliest Catch, which is up in Alaska, but they also do a talk show, if you will, at the end of the season called After the Catch. And this year that was filmed in New Orleans. And so you had the Alaskan crab fishermen who could talk about what they're still seeing from the Exxon Valdez. Right. Talking with those guys in New Orleans. So it's After the Catch, you have to dig around for it, but they had some of them on there talking about the impact, and at that point, that was early June, talking about the fact that no, it's not hurting your shrimp in the supermarket, so please don't buy the cheap stuff from Thailand, ask for U.S. wild-caught shrimp.
Yeah.
So, there's an education, but those guys talking fisherman to fisherman, you didn't have the filter that those of us in maybe a lighter society have.
Right. One other thing I wanted to just touch on, and it again is the journalism thing and the access thing, and not to beat a dead horse, but they were very forthcoming with giving me access. I got some information from a friend of mine who used to be in the Coast Guard. Maybe you've seen her on video just a second ago. And so I got in touch with the Joint Command, and I said to them, here's what I'm doing. I'm coming down for access. I want to be able to go out in the boats. I want to be in a plane. I want to be able to go get my own content and either use that in the pool or share that wherever. They were very forthcoming until I started asking difficult questions where they had to provide a representative from BP to answer questions about dispersants, to answer questions about the toxicology, to answer questions that were a lot more specific than just procedural. And the lines pretty much went dead. I had to ask them a number of times a set of questions, and I still haven't heard back from them. And I ping them every so often with the same questions because I don't want that to die, because these questions they're relevant to what's going on down there, but they said to me that they'll get back to me in a certain amount of time, and they didn't. Then I pinged them, and then they said, oh, we'll be back to you, and I pinged them again. And so there's still a lack of access, and I'm not down there anymore to like go around and kick tires or show up at the incident command in person and be like, hey, you said you were going to help me out, what's the deal? Now all I have is an email that I can send down periodically and try and get an answer out of them, and they can just say, well, BP hasn't gotten back to us. So
do you feel like the journalists will take it upon their own to go back down there to reinvestigate questions with families and ask what's really happening with the dispersants that the government said you shouldn't be doing, but they did anyways? And because basically took all the oil that was on the top, they went, we'll put it down here so you really can't see it from the aerial view, unless you do, other types of imaging. But now there's the question of, what's going on with the dispersants down at a lower level. Is it effective? What's going to the ecosystem down there? But do you feel like now that there's going to be, just from a journalist standpoint, that there's just going to be the 1 year later anniversary? We'll have a party, we'll have a recognition, we'll do all this kind of acknowledgement of what's going on and what's the goodness, what the challenges come on. But will there be true reporting, or will it be traditional American journalism where we'll kind of like recognize things on anniversary basis, but not what's going on in people's backyards?
I think that, well, I hope two things. I hope that people don't let this just fade into the background. And I don't think it'll fade away entirely, because you have Woods Hole, you have scientists, you have people who are paying attention to it. You have filmmakers like Spike Lee, who did the thing on Katrina, and maybe focusing more on different disasters in that area. And you have that region. You have a Super Bowl winner. You have a focus. You have a magnifying glass on that region already. So I think that helps them in staying in the news and staying focused. But as a journalist, yeah, that story's dead. We're moving on to the next thing. The only thing that may help that story is the same model that EDR really took by the reins and hired me to go down as a journalist. You may have these organizations, you might have Woods Hole or some other scientific institute or organization contact someone who is a journalist for hire and say, why don't you go down and sort of mix this up again and find out what's going on at this period. Because we can't afford to go down, and we don't have the access to ask the questions or the wherewithal to do it, and just report back to us. And I think that's the new model of reporting, where you can hire some people to go do that, who are still credentialed journalists and still have that access, still have that training, and know what to look for, know who to talk to. But it's almost like making the news yourself. You don't go in with a predetermined outcome, but you go in with the power of a fairly big stick to find this information out.
But where does this lie within your aspect of saying, like, the first rule of journalism is to keep businesses, initiative, organizations, and government kind of on the level, honest. And keep them honest. We're gonna do a research. We're actually gonna pull out the hard questions. We're gonna keep this going.
Right.
When it's all being outside of citizen journalism and accredited journalism going down there. If it's going to be sanctioned by organizations and businesses going, okay, now let's go back down. If it's not being paid by a news organization or an independent news or an organization to go down and send people down there to go look at it, and they're chasing the next Timmy fell in the well or element, then how do we keep that actually honest if we kind of just follow the next thing and let this kind of go under the rug?
You put pressure on news organizations to say, I want to find out what's going on. You talk to the people at Time, at Newsweek, at Popular Science, at Wired, just to find out, okay, what's the science of the ecosystem in the Gulf, and how is this happening? You put pressure on private organizations that can afford to underwrite a journalist travel down there. where NPR might not be able to afford to send me down, you can get a group to talk to NPR and say, look, we will underwrite this story if you want to chase it down. And then maybe NPR talks to me and says, Cutler, go back to New Orleans, find out what's happening. Or there's a lot more reporting from afar. The topics that I see being chased down right now are going to be the toxicology in the Gulf. Whatever's happening at the base level in the Gulf, from a shellfish or a shrimp damage perspective. And that's what Woods Hole is looking at right now with the dispersants in the water. You're going to find out financial stories. Those are going to be huge now. You're going to find out what BP is going through, what they're going through from a managerial structure, what they're going to have to put up with fines and with remediation. You're going to find a lot of legal stories. You'll find law reviews and stuff like that, covering suits from interruption of business to true damage to the shore. You're going to find environmental journals that are doing stories on, is it better to burn the wetland grasses with the oil on top so the oil doesn't get to the roots, or is it better to step on the really fragile surface and wipe down the grass?
So just last question, from a journalist standpoint, what do you think the American and the global appetite is for continuing stories on this issue? For actually kind of really looking forward to and having this, digested and kind of put forth? Or is it going to become, the back section, or what's the appetite, you think, just from a journalist standpoint?
The thing that makes the American public great and the world public great as readers is that they have such a varied appetite for different stories. You're still going to have a number of people that care about this and will push. You also have a huge audience that's ready for some football. They're done with this story. It's preseason football, they're caring about their team, they're caring about whatever else is going on. They're worried about hurricane season. You have a percentage of people that want to see a hurricane blast through and destroy New Orleans and have another big story happen down there. Being honest, you have people that want to see some disasters, and you have a lot of people that want to see cleanup and feel-good stories. So it's a matter of an audience dictating what they want to read about. What's feel-good? When's Sweeps Week? When does Top Chef wrap up? It's all over the map. This was just big because 11 people lost their lives, and you had an explosion, and you had oil just spilling into the Gulf, and it was visible. But now all these news crews went to the vineyard to follow Obama. No one's down there anymore. They're listening to Woods Hole, who went down to the study and came back. I was on a plane on my way down talking with oceanographers from the Navy. These people were trying to figure out just Hurricane Pass and different things all over the country, and they were up here in Boston. They had never heard of Woods Hole. So I don't know who's training whom or what stories are getting across. You have a huge disparity of knowledge in this country, and you may have people in this country who haven't even heard of the BP oil spill.